Hey, I am Nick Volz, and I am the assistant professor of trumpet here at Loyola University in New Orleans. And I've been asked to talk about what I do as a professor here and how that applies to the whole concept of space, and this space in particular. So, the bulk of my work here at Loyola is done right here in this very office, which is a delightful space. I have recently painted. Since it is an office without windows, I painted it a color called San Francisco Sky, which is a bit optimistic. So the majority of what I do is teach one-on-one trumpet lessons here, and I work individually with students that are music majors on areas of music performance. And additionally, I teach a couple of courses upstairs in larger spaces, and also conduct a couple of ensembles, also in larger spaces. Something about this space in particular, this is not very friendly to an instrument like the trumpet. When you play a note on the trumpet, you are setting into motion a vibration of airwaves. When I play a middle G, I'm setting a certain frequency, and it's setting sound waves into motion, and ultimately they reach your ear. In a room this size, unfortunately that note doesn't have much room to develop or materialize. So it's not, like I said, it's not the most friendly space for trumpet players. It's also a way of ensuring that my students don't get too arrogant on me. So, okay. A couple of things, trumpet issues that I see that are very common, especially for young players, incoming freshmen, or high school trumpet players. And I guess it does rely a little bit on space. The amount of space inside of the tubing of this horn directly affects the pitch of the instrument. The longer the tube is, the lower the pitch is, the lower the note. Okay, so given that, this is our main tuning slide, and the ideal placement for a tuning slide is right here, maybe half an inch, maybe quarter of an inch. And I'll play using my chromatic tuner. Okay, and that's with my tuning slide set. You know, I have horn right out of the case, and it's kind of where it usually falls. Now, an issue I see often with younger players is they'll come in and they'll have their tuning slide way out, you know, about that far, probably over an inch. Now, what happens if we play and we have our tuning slide out that far? Obviously, it'll lower the pitch. These younger players that come in with their tuning slides out that far, they play in tune, so they aren't necessarily playing flat on the pitch. Now, I can play in tune with my tuning slide out this far. Let's see what it does to the sound quality. A little bit stuffy, huh? So in order to compensate for what is too much on the tuning slide, I'm having to use a lot more tension here in the embouchure and play with a lot tighter setup. To keep that pitch from sagging, I'm actually holding it up with my lips. So the sound gets a lot tighter, a lot smaller. It's more difficult to control. So what's one thing that students can do if you say, well, I'm playing in tune, I think I have an okay sound, and my tuning slide is out 1.5 inches. Well, one thing that'll help students really start to play lower on the pitch center are lip bends. And what a lip bend is you just simply take a note, any note, and you can begin by bending in half steps. So example, so that's a G bent down to an F sharp without changing valves. So those are half steps. You can also bend a whole step. So an example of whole steps. Etc. So by bending a pitch down, you can start to see that tuning slide come back in. So the sound should warm up greatly, should be a lot more resonant, and should have a much nicer core to the sound. Okay. Another common misconception of trumpet players is in the area of multiple tonguing. Often students aren't introduced to multiple tonguing until they're either late in high school or as they enter college. Now, double tonguing is pretty straightforward. As we start single tonguing very quickly, ultimately we'll hit a spot that's just too fast to go. Right? Well, what we do, we start incorporating ta-ka-ta-ka-ta, the K syllable. So for double tonguing, which is duplets, whether it's fast 8th notes, 16th notes, 30 seconds, etc., taka-taka-taka-taka-ta are the syllables we use. Tika-tika-tika-tika-tika-tika-tika-ta. Right. Most people get that one right. The area where younger students often go wrong is in triple tonguing. And there are a variety of ways that people execute triple tonguing, but I strongly believe the way to start a young student on triple tonguing is ta-ta-ka. So in other words, you're tonguing notes that are in threes, either triplets or sextuplets or fast notes in a 6/8 time signature. And in order to establish that ta-ta-ka, 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 etc. And that's often an area of much confusion. So, one other thing that may apply to this space in particular is the area of sound concept. Now, as a college trumpet teacher, the most important thing I can do for my students is A, let them know where they are in terms of sound concept, what they really sound like, and then B, help them get to where they want to get in terms of tone production. Now, often that includes modeling a good idea of sound concept. But aside from myself, I often encourage my students to seek out other models of sound concept. So, recordings of great trumpet players. Regarding this space, my trumpet studio, as a teaching space and a weekly performance space for my students where they come in and play at least 1 hour, I think it's very important that they all venture beyond this space. Often we'll have open lessons in a larger room, a large rehearsal room upstairs, or even an outside lesson if we can get far enough from all the other offices. So it's really important that students, especially developing trumpet players, get into a large enough room to where they can really hear what they sound like. Another common space issue is that of the practice room, which is in every music school out there. And unfortunately, all of the practice rooms we have at this school are very small, they're all made of metal, and they do not give the student an accurate idea of what he or she sounds like. So in that way, that space is a bit of a hindrance. So I encourage my students to get into as many different spaces as possible and practice and perform in as many different spaces as possible.